Hello, my fellow Americans. I'm Bill Lipinski, and now you're going to hear from my very good friend, Ray Hanania.
And I am Ray Hanania, and this is Two Guys on Politics, looking back on the top stories of 2023 and discussing the third party candidacy of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. This is season 2, episode 19, December 29, 2023. And as everybody knows, Two Guys on Politics presents a Reagan Democrat perspective from Chicagoland, Southwest Side, and the Midwest. Bill, we got a nice list of topics that we came up with. You actually identified a lot, but immigration and migrants, Palestinian activism, Ukraine losing support, and we're looking back on 2024. China was poised to continue to be one of the world's economic powerhouses, but apparently everything is collapsing. We can talk a little bit about that. And Republican Democratic parties continue to fight, and JFK seems to surge, or I should say Robert F. Kennedy. Why I keep thinking Robert F. Kennedy and JFK, and the U.S. economy and the interest rates. And then we'll end it with the biggest story that remains, which, if you listen to us through the end of the podcast, you'll find out what that is. So, Bill,
Absolutely.
immigration and migrants, that's our number one topic.
Well, I think that that situation has not improved one iota since the last time we talked about it. These Democratic controlled cities are simply being overwhelmed by all these migrants. And Joe Biden and his administration just seems to absolutely refuse to do anything about it. Now, I think it's ironic that these big cities controlled by the Democrats, have said that they will welcome these migrants. But now they're so overwhelmed, they are pleading, begging, badgering the Biden administration to do something about it, give them some kind of help. I don't foresee that coming at the present time. We can't even get a deal done on the Ukraine and Israel because of the dispute about the border. And the Democrats and Biden, in my opinion, have been terrible about the border. And Biden may very well lose this election simply because of the way he has not handled the border.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think his failure on the border is a big mainstream issue that covers a lot of people outside of the special interest issues that also are going to hurt him. But immigration has always been this something that the Democrats would scream about but do nothing about. And I mentioned on a couple of shows back, former Congressman Luis Gutierrez. I remember the day he first ran as congressman, the former alderman and former taxi cab driver. He ran for Congress. I helped him. And immigration was a big issue. We're going to resolve immigration. Well, he was in there for what, 10 20 years, 10 terms, and nothing ever got done about it. And it always made me wonder that many Democrats don't want immigration to go away. They want it to be a problem because, in truth, I think these immigrants, in their eyes, are potential Democrats, and they want to bring them into this country as a way to boost up the Democratic Party, believing that illegal aliens, illegal immigrants, migrants, which I term are really homeless. Migrants is a misleading term. These are homeless people that are being dropped off in the middle of the streets. The Democrats view all of them and say, hey, eventually they're going to become our citizens and they're going to vote for us because of what we're doing for them. But it's such a drain and it has such a negative impact on our economy and our way of life. It's one of our biggest problems. We can't
And
control the border.
I think the Republicans, I don't know if they really want to do anything about it or not, because the Republicans historically have liked that immigration because it gets to be cheap labor for their companies, for their corporations. So they like that. That way the big investors, the big corporations make more money because they hire people at lower wages.
Well, I don't know if that's actually the case for Republicans, because I know that the people that I know live down in some of those Republican states are really upset with the crime associated with illegal aliens because, illegal aliens driving a car, he gets in a car accident, he just takes off. They can't find him. So the person stuck is the legal citizen that ends up having to pay for the damage, the hospitalization. But I do agree with this part of what you're saying, that the Republicans want this issue because it gives them an opportunity to shore up continue to keep everybody in line that supports them by pointing to the Democrats how terrible they are at, fueling this problem. They're just, the Democrats are fueling it. The Republicans are enjoying it and exploiting it. But you're right. I think both need to do something, and I don't think either are.
No, I don't think either are either. And but the rank and file Republicans are opposed to all of this immigration. It is the big corporations that are supportive of this policy to get that cheap labor. Believe me.
When you say big corporations, I mean, let's say somebody like not Northern Trust Bank. That was one of my old banks. First Chicago, or one of the big banks. Do they really want, illegal aliens? Do they really work for companies like that? Or are we talking about mainstream companies that really prefer, the illegal aliens to use them?
Well, they like to have those people in the agricultural industry because they're a bunch of migrants.
Right.
Actually, I call them illegal aliens, and they'll work very, cheaply for taking care of agricultural picking and so forth. Also, do you know anyone that employs a company to do the cutting of the grass? They're all Hispanics, right?
Yes, they are. And a lot of them, I talked to one of them, and I remember a guy that used to cut my grass a number of years ago. Now I do it because it's good exercise for me. But when he did it, he told me he had a hard time finding anybody that worked with him, and everybody that worked with him was not a legal citizen.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And it's that's the only way he could get his business going.
No, and I have a guy that works for me now, does a very good job. The people that he has working for him do a very good job. But I don't think there's 7 of them that I know of. And I don't think that more than 3 of them really speak or understand English. And if that's the case, they are illegal aliens.
Well, let's go through some of these other ones we got, because we got a lot of topics. We love some of the top stories of 2024. You were surprised at the big outpouring of support by Palestinian activists for what was happening in the Gaza Strip. And I think, the protests have been huge all over the country, which suggests that it's not just Arabs and Palestinians and Muslims that are protesting. There are probably 70% of these protests are people that are non-Arab, non-Palestinian, and non-Muslim. So they're attracting a large amount of support, I think, in this country. What do you think?
Why is that?
Well, I think that this is kind of like the Vietnam War. If you got to look back to the 60s, when we weren't seeing the videos of what was happening in Vietnam, we were all gung-ho for the war. Our sons and daughters were mainly sons going there to serve at the time. But as soon as television started broadcasting these videos of how the horror of the Vietnam War, and we heard about massacres and killings of not just against our troops, but by our troops, it turned the public. And what's happening today, even though the mainstream media is very pro-Israel and they control the media, I don't want to say control. Israel does a better job of influencing the media than the Arabs do. The Arabs have no sense of how to do media or public relations. So the media is on the side of Israel, and everything Israel says, they repeat. Anything the Arabs say, they question, and they put a little ring around going, you don't want to trust this. So I think what's happening is social media is having its big day in terms of eclipsing the mainstream media. Social media is filled with videos of brutality by Israelis. There's some of, the Palestinians on October 7th, when they attacked that music festival and killed all those Israelis. It was a horrible incident, but that was just one day. We've now seen something like 80 days of daily massacres of civilians, women and children by the Israelis. And I think those images are not like me telling you something. You see an image of a little kid that's Arab there's no way you're going to say, oh, that kid deserves it. It's going to really kind of tug at your heart. And I think that's what Israel is facing today. They're losing control of the narrative, something they've always had.
Well, I think that what the attack did was horrendous. There is absolutely no question about that in my mind. And I think that it's the Hamas, the Palestinians that have initiated this conflict. But as I said on this program several weeks ago, Israel has to become more concerned about killing innocent civilians.
Right.
Because if they don't, the news media ultimately is going to turn against them. And I believe that that truly is what has happened. And I still support Israel. I disagree with you on a number of points, but you're entitled to your opinion. I'm entitled to mine. But what I have said time after time is that they have to become, more concerned about the people that they are killing. And is it really necessary to demolish all these structures in Gaza?
Right.
It's beginning to look like in the stuff I see on TV, there's almost no building standing any longer. Now,
Right.
this war is going to be over at some point, and you can't really call it a war because Hamas in comparison to what Israel has, they can't possibly withstand it. I mean, Israel has the latest weapons, available to them, and they've got them by the tons because they get them from who, us, okay?
Yeah, listen, they're all made in the United States weaponry, and you're absolutely right. The only thing I would say is, it's not that I criticize Israel. I do criticize Israel's government. I think that they're the most right-wing, extreme, dangerous government that's ever been in the Middle East, and I blame Netanyahu and his party over the last 20 years of destroying the peace process and oppressing the Palestinians. I'm a big supporter of the two-state solution. And I really think we basically, on the fundamentals, we agree. We're both against violence. I think we both want to see both sides at peace and, achieve peace. They almost had it, but the extremists on both sides, the Hamas, which is an extremist organization, and Netanyahu's political party, and who's facing 3 indictments. And this has been his past year. All he's done is pandered to the extremism to give them what they've wanted for years but have never gotten, in exchange for suppressing those indictments and keeping them out of jail. So I think we're like, Israel is a reflection of the US in many ways. We're totally stuck in mud here in the United States, our politics. And I think Israel is in the same situation. They're stuck. They can't break out of this fanaticism that is really overcoming the country.
Well, and I'm also for this two-state solution to the close to it every once in a while, and then something happens and it all falls apart for another 10 or 15 years.
It's really extremists that they know how to stop it.
Okay, let's move on to the next topic.
Yeah, and the next, so that's draining a lot of our money and our resources from this next topic. Ukraine is losing support, and I've argued that it has a lot to do with our shift from fighting the the new Soviet threat, which I think is a threat, and preventing them from taking over Ukraine. We've shifted to defending Israel, which is not just one of our closest allies, but has so intertwined into American politics that it's costing. I think it's really undermining our war against Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Well, I think the biggest problem with the Ukrainian situation is that if you remember back in the spring, they were going to have this great offensive. They were really going to go after the Russians. They were going to drive the Russians out of Ukraine. It didn't happen. I mean, they tried. They were totally and completely unsuccessful. This war has now settled into a war of attrition. Most Americans have a short time span. They were all for Ukraine in the beginning. They got all hepped up because the Ukrainians said it themselves how successful they were going to be. It didn't work out. Europeans are feeling the same way. They're putting money into it. They're putting weapons into it. doesn't seem to be going anyplace anymore. It seems like a war of attrition. And I don't believe that their president has handled things as well as he could have handled
Right.
them. So I think there have been times when he has criticized us for the lack of support. He has criticized the Europeans for the lack of support. You know, we really had no obligation as far as a treaty goes to support Ukraine. They're not part of NATO. So, I mean, a lot of things to cause this loss of support. And now with the Israeli situation going on, you almost never hear anything about Ukraine. I mean, it's totally off the map.
You're absolutely right. I mean, but and it's true. We don't have a alliance with Ukraine, but we do have an alliance against the rise of communism and Soviet imperialism. The restoration of the Soviet Republic under this dictator, Vladimir Putin. I don't think this is so much about Ukraine as it is about the rise of the Soviet Union. If they can beat and take over Ukraine, they can take over anything because Ukraine is right next to NATO. All those nations are running to Ukraine now. They're running to join NATO because they see what's going to happen in the future. If the Russians take over Ukraine, the whole of Europe will be subject, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but in Putin's years, depending on how long he lasts, he's going to want to go back into some of those countries and take back what used to be the foundation of the Soviet Union when it was at its highest, greatest influence. Stalin backstabbed us during World War II, at the end of World War II. And we tried to be nice with Stalin, but you cannot trust those communists. We should have allowed the Nazis to destroy Russia, and we should have gone in and freed the Russians from Nazi oppression the way we freed, Europe from Nazi oppression, and then reorganized Russia. But we didn't do that. We shored up the Russians to make them look stronger, and that turned against us. We cannot trust communism ever. And we can't ever side with communism, even with the Chinese. If someone invaded them, we should be with them invading the Chinese and changing their government. But communism is our biggest threat, and we have to stop it.
Well, what you just had to say makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of points that you made that I happen to disagree with, though. I would like to do a show in the near future on this very situation.
Let's do that maybe next week.
Oh, that might be a good idea to do it next week.
And mention Kennedy's, third-party candidacy, since that's popular with our listeners.
Yes, it certainly seems to be very popular. The argument that you made about Russia, once they take over Ukraine, they're going to roll into Poland, Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia. That argument was very strong, and it seemed to be believed by the vast majority of the American people and the European people when this conflict started.
Right.
As time has gone on, it seems to me that argument has become less and less powerful. I think that it's still a very important issue, and I think it is still true, but most Americans, most Europeans, they don't want to hear that anymore.
Right.
Because they're really looking for an off-ramp from this as quickly as possible. And I think that's if we don't stop them now, we got to stop them at some point, someplace along the line.
I think part of the problem is our failed, weak leadership. If we had a strong president like Eisenhower or Ronald Reagan in charge of the White House today, we would not have that problem. Ukraine would be steamrolling probably all the way to Moscow right now. But instead, we got a weak leader who is wishy-washy, whose administration is run by his staff from the Obama and Clinton administrations. They're running the White House. We know that. These are people that are no longer in office. What do they got to lose? Biden is a guy that's going to wear this collar when, in terms of history, when his term ends. And I'm not sure he's going to get reelected. He may be a one-term president, but he is the problem that I'm not saying he caused this, but he's allowing it to get worse by his poor leadership. And I think that really hurts.
Well, I think the fact that we have piecemealed the weaponry going to Ukraine has been very detrimental to Ukrainians' overall victory.
Yeah.
We've promised them some fighter planes quite a while ago. I do not believe that we have delivered those as of yet, because we contend that there are no Ukrainian pilots trained up totally to fly these planes.
Right.
How long does it take, to teach somebody how to fly a plane?
Yeah. Especially pilots that already know how to fly.
Right,
To
exactly.
up to a bigger, you're right. I think that there's, listen, I personally think that we should lift the restriction that we placed on Ukraine and allow them to do specific targeted missions into the Soviet Union. Because I'm not calling it Russia anymore. I'm calling it the Soviet for what it really is. This is a dictator and tyrant. So, but anyway, that is, you don't see any end to that in the near future, do you?
No, I do not. Absolutely not. No.
I agree with you on that. But does it impact the next topic, China? Here was this bull running at us that we were so afraid of, and they still are a threat, an economic threat. But apparently, what we see as the economic threat isn't materializing in China. They're in an economic collapse, from what I've seen on the CNBC, talking about how their stock market is the worst performing, is collapsing, is dropping significantly, while everybody else is going up. What the heck is happening in China? What do you think?
Well, I agree with that. They are still a very strong military power. There is no question about that. But a year and a half, 2 years ago, every commentator that you would hear was telling us how powerful economically China was, how it was going to take over the world because of their great economy. Now, you mentioned their stock market having big problems. They do. Their housing industry has very, very big problems. There's so many vacant, apartments, office buildings in China. That is just about totally collapsed. Unemployment is higher than it probably has ever been. And it's a lot of young people, people under 30 years of age, people who have very good education. Most of those educations were happen to be had in the United States of America. They can't find a job. They go to a library to be with their fellow unemployed people, and they are talking more about the government. And I don't foresee any possibility of overthrowing this government at the present time. But the people that are unemployed are certainly making it more difficult for the Chinese. And our economy, I think, is doing much better than their economy. In fact, I think our economy is doing better than anyone else in the world's economy. And if you want to give Joe Biden credit for it, fine, give him credit for it. To me, I frankly believe most of the time, if not all the time, the president has nothing to do with the economy. But
Well, my feeling is, look, the economy dropped so badly that any increase is going to look positive. During COVID, our economy dropped so significantly, it's starting to come up. This isn't because Biden is such a great guy or a great leader. This is because the economy is not falling anymore because of COVID. People are returning to what they're doing. Inflation, which rose up so high over the last 2 years, seems to be subsiding. But we do see it reflected in much higher interest rates because not everybody goes up and down. Inflation goes up and then goes down. Bank interest rates go up. They rarely come down. And I think there are economic forces in our country that enjoy when we have a problem because they make more money. People borrow more money. People need more money. People need more credit. And I think the banking industry is exploiting that. But I agree with you. Our economy is getting better. I don't think it has anything to do with Biden's leadership, although he is claiming credit for it.
Yes, he is definitely claiming credit for it.
And then go ahead.
No, that's all right.
I was going to say our next topic was, the Republican and Democratic parties continue to be fighting. That's been a big story all year. I keep saying JFK, Robert F. Kennedy.
Are you on his payroll?
Well, listen, I'm a big JFK believer that the JFK assassination was never fully exposed. They've been lying to us for years. So for me, Robert F. Kennedy being elected, he's going to release every document that will embarrass everybody. Half the people that are going to be embarrassed are dead. The head of the FBI is going to be embarrassed because of the failure of what he didn't do, what he should have been doing. LBJ and his closeness to the anti-Kennedy, movement in Dallas was the hub of We Hate Kennedy in the United States. He went there hoping to kind of solidify everything, and he gets assassinated there. I don't think they did enough. The mafia, being angry because they allegedly helped steal the votes in Chicago, to get Kennedy elected. And then he turned and put his brother in charge. And his brother said, the mob and the mafia are the number one threat to the American people. There were a lot of people that were, and then Castro, all those people hated him so much. I don't think it was a conspiracy of everybody got together in a meeting room, but I think all those forces came together because they were unconfronted, and they resulted in making it easy to take him out. And something should have been done. And I think that's what they're embarrassed by, that it'll make everybody look bad that they didn't do their jobs.
Well, I remember very well when John Fitzgerald Kennedy was assassinated. And the Warren Committee report came out, and no one questioned it whatsoever. Everybody said, oh, well, this is our government. They investigated it very thoroughly. It's Lee Harvey Oswald. It's no one else. It's not the mafia, the CIA, the FBI. Okay. That's the way it was probably for the first year and a half, 2 years after
Right.
the assassination. Then, because of people finding out that there were a lot of documents that had
Right.
not been released to this day, people started doubting the Warren Committee report.
Yeah. Why not release them?
Well, I'm an American citizen. You're an American citizen. Why do some American citizens have the right to know all those reports and we
Right.
don't?
I agree with you.
That occurred in 1963. That was
Right.
a long time ago.
Yeah.
I didn't even have a son back in 1963.
60 years ago this past November.
Yeah, I
60
had a
years. What
daughter
are
that's
they?
about a
It
year and a
makes you
half.
feel like they're hiding something, right? Like something's being hidden.
Listen, I never believed that there was anything being hidden,
Well,
but I do today. I don't think I don't think it was a great conspiracy, but I do believe, as you said, you rightfully said, a lot of people are going to be embarrassed over this. Well, that's really too bad.
I agree with
You
you.
and the rest of the American citizens have a perfect right to know what happened in that investigation, what happened in that assassination. I'd still like to know how Jack Ruby, with a gun, could get so close to Lee Harvey Oswald.
In the police station. He's a
Yes.
mob associate running a strip joint, and he's there palling around with the police. There's something was wrong. It stinks. And I'll tell you, that's the one reason again why I support RFK, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in this election, partly because of that reason. I just don't see anybody on the Republican side or the Democratic side who's giving me a real reason of hope to believe that they can do anything better for us, that either one of them will continue in neutral the way we are now on the same ugly, bad course. I'm hoping at least with RFK, if he can't make the world better, he can at least do one thing, get those documents released so I can take it off my agenda all my life and move on.
Right. I have no quarrel with that whatsoever.
What about the Republican candidates? And we've talked about Biden a little bit, but what about the Republican candidates? Anybody moving up or down?
What did you think of Nikki Haley failing to mention slavery as one of the causes of the Civil War? It's incredible. How could that was the main cause of the Civil War? Yes, there were economic concerns, there were regional concerns, but the number one concern was slavery, and she failed to mention it.
It reminds me of John McCain's running mate, the governor of Alaska. What was her name? Sarah Palin, who asked a simple question about what magazines do you read, and you realize that she didn't know anything about any of that. That was a killer moment for her, and I think that's the same problem with Nikki Haley. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard anybody say, and it makes you wonder, can you really allow somebody like that to become a leader? I heard rumors that, the one you like, Chris Christie, was thinking of making her his vice presidential candidate. Do you think that would work, or is that another Kamala Harris?
I no longer think it would work. No, I mean, I was starting to lean towards hoping that she might be able to make it. But after I heard that statement, I mean, anyone that would make a statement like that, I just cannot feel comfortable with as president of the United States. Okay.
Right.
Now, I mean, that was like Joe Biden. He meets with the head of China. They have all these good, wonderful talks and everything. And then the next day, he calls him a dictator. Well, we all know he's a dictator. We don't have to be told he's a dictator.
Right.
But if you're trying to, if you're trying to calm things down between China and the United States, one of the last things you ought to do is call the head of China a dictator.
And then worse to see the video on social media of Anthony Blinken sitting there like dropping his head, shaking it, like he didn't think his boss should be saying that. It only emphasizes the craziness of what we have in this country. I think we've talked about the U.S. economy and interest rates, haven't we?
Yes, we have.
Yeah, so why don't we go to the final part? What do you think is the biggest story, which I think we kind of touched on, but the biggest story of 2024 in
I
your
still think the divide in this country, I mean, this country is splitting apart into two groups, okay? There's the extreme left wingers, there's the extreme right wingers, and then there's the great middle. But the great middle refuses to move. They refuse to do anything about these extremes. I mean, you have a candidate for the Democrats running who I believe, if he isn't supportive, many of the people around him are supportive of a more socialist style government, okay? Then you have the people in the Republican Party supporting Trump. I frankly believe they're looking for a dictator to run this country, okay? That's not America. We are a democracy. We are a republic. But the great middle class, I shouldn't say middle class, but the great middle of people who are much more reasonable, much more rational than the extremes, just do not seem to move forward. I mean, Robert Kennedy Jr., I don't know what kind of president he would be, okay?
right.
But he may turn out to be a better candidate, a better president than either one of the two people that we have running at the present time. I wish the Democrats could get a different candidate. I wish the Republicans could get a different candidate. To me, that's the greatest problem we have in this country. It's the biggest story. And, that divide is going to cause us to sink further and further into chaos and violence in this country.
I totally agree with you. I think that still is the biggest story. And I have a theory about why the centrists, the people in the middle, haven't rose up. And I think part of it is that they've been beaten down by the economy, the coronavirus over the last 2 years, the collapse in the economy, the rise of inflation. They've been so focused on surviving and making money and, losing so many, everybody in America knows someone who died from coronavirus. So I lost 2 friends. So I think that they're coming out of that now, and we might see a change because I think, for example, I don't think Biden is going to win. I think when you look at the swing states, how narrow the margin was, 10, 20,000 votes in some of these states that he beat Trump in the last election. These Arab and Muslims who are leading this abandoned Biden and many quote unquote progressives, or not so progressives, but centrist Democrats, they're not going to vote for Biden, and he's going to lose. Now we're going to get Trump, I think, if the Republicans can't get their act together, and I don't see any reason how they can. And I think that the alternative is going to be maybe for the first time in our history, we might see, at least not the first time, but in recent history, we might see a third-party candidate like Robert F. Kennedy actually have an opportunity to win. The odds are against them, but I still think this is probably the best shot a third party candidate has.
I'd still like to see no labels come up with a candidate, but they still haven't come up with a candidate. They keep moving on and having video meetings and rallies here and there to raise money, to pay the people who are running this operation. But the operation is supposed to be for an alternative to the Democrats and the Republicans. I still don't see their candidate. And, you got to get the candidate out there. People have to get to know them. They're running out of time as far as I'm concerned. So I just don't see their effort really coming to anything whatsoever. They may ultimately wind up with a candidate for president and vice president. They may get on the ballot in all 50 states. But their lack of PR right now for their candidate, I think, is going to make it impossible for that candidate to gather enough votes to be elected.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the disarray surrounding the No Labels Party was a great idea. They've
Yes.
never been able to get it off the ground in a strong way. You don't hear much about it at all. It's kind of, you hear more about Robert F. Kennedy. His name has strong magnetism. If I were part of the new No Labels Party, I would just go right to Kennedy and endorse him and work with him and build one third party. And who knows, that could change politics. All right. I think we covered everything, Bill. What do you think? Anything else?
I think so too. No, I can't think of anything else at the present time other than the total and complete collapse of the Chicago Cubs in the last 2 weeks of the season.
That's really shocking. And I thought the Chicago Bears, and I'm not a big sports fan, but they just couldn't get their act together to win those last 5 games. They seem to be doing so. So they're out. Sports hasn't been very successful in Chicago in a while, has it? It's taken a
Let's see, I'm trying to think. Well, there was Michael Jordan. What was that, 20 years
Yeah,
ago?
that was like in the 90s, I think. All right. Anyway, listen, I'm Ray Hanania,
I'm Bill Lipinski.
and
Until next time, my fellow Americans,
this
thanks
is
for listening.
This has been Two Guys on Politics. And when one note before we close, we want to thank all the people that have been listening to our show. We appreciate it. We hit a new record this past show. It just skyrocketed over 1,300 listens and views on the YouTube, not including the audio podcast, but on the YouTube podcast. It's done very well. And we both appreciate your listening to us and your support. And we wish everybody a happy new year.
Thank you.